individuals that have spoken for further inquiry. Member Pachegan, would you like to start us off? Or do you want to just open it up?
Just soon let everyone else that had questions continue.
Well, I have a couple of questions. Who can I ask about this? Well, I'm gonna throw it out there and see who believes that they're the most informed. We've heard that there are situations where we have inflation-adjusted numbers and where there are instances of inflation not being accounted for. Maybe I can ask Mr. Richards and Mr. Brady to comment on this issue. My understanding is that the ballot initiative, as it's floated on the market, it had a value of $9.9 billion. Is that correct?
That was the bond number. The estimated cost of the first phase was $33 billion in 2008 dollars.
So has that bond been floated?
No, it is not.
All right. So when it is floated, what will the number be for the California?
The bonds are not inflation adjusted.
So we will be asking for 9.9.
Correct.
So I'm looking at, this would be what I believe is the 2008 California High-Speed Rail Business Plan, and it says the LA to San Francisco, blah, 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 but it refers to in 2008 dollars.
That's correct.
So is there any portion of the bonding process that will be inflation adjusted?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. All right. That answers that question. We've all gone through airport security, and it takes some time. My question is, as we contemplate this rail project and come up with numbers on how long it will take to get from point A to point B, this poses a rather attractive target of opportunity. We're going to need to have security protocols put into place for individuals to get on this train. Has that been considered as part of the overall program? Because going to the airport is very time consuming. I don't think it would ever be at that level, but I don't think it would be an open access scenario because of the prestige of this project and the inherent vulnerabilities. Would anybody be able to comment on whether security protocols have been considered in the attractiveness of taking a train as opposed to taking a plane?
Security protocols are under development right now. As you're aware, with Amtrak in the state of California, you buy a ticket, and when the train arrives, you walk out and on it. I can't tell you that there's any more, any less than that with high-speed rail at this point.
Okay.
If I could just briefly comment, Mr. Chairman, the security situation is interesting. In Europe, for example, you have to go through the same things that you have to go through on an airplane. People line up, and you have to put your hand luggage on the thing. It goes through. You have to take off your watch and your shoes and all that type of thing. Meanwhile, your baggage that you've checked is checked. So you can imagine a place like Los Angeles or San Francisco with thousands of people. Time it's going to take some time. The thing nobody ever talks about, though, is the difference between trains and planes. When a plane...
One's up there, one's down here.
When the plane... Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
When the plane takes off and doesn't explode, you feel pretty relieved because it's been through all the checks and you're fine. You're in the air. And that almost always happens. Always happens. Imagine a train, though, going through vast areas of rural California at night, and the opportunity for terrorism to place a van full of fertilizer and kerosene at some isolated underpass and setting it off with a cell phone. This type of thing can happen. That's impossible to guard against at the places where people board the trains.
I don't want to inflame this issue with too much talk of the security vulnerabilities. My inquiry was limited to, if there are security protocols, will it add to the calculus of the amount of time it takes to transport from point A to point B. So I just throw that out there. But my last question is, the fare had been put out there at $55, and that would have been in 2008 dollars. Are we looking at an inflation adjustment in a 2014 value of $75?
Mr. Chairman, I think the original number was $50, and if you inflation adjust that, you'd be at about $75 now, which is somewhat consistent with the numbers we're using in our modeling today.
Now, when we say that's not normal cost of living inflation, like the CPI index. This is when we refer to inflation.
Right.
What is that? Inflation of the value of the service commensurate with the ticket?
If you just look at the difference between what was in 2008, currently it's in the neighborhood of $75 today, or $77, $75 to $77. So whether I haven't calculated what that percentage is, that's the reality of what the market is, where the market's moved from 2008 until 2014. That's what the market's dictating.
But it's not a living adjustment calculation. It is an increase in the value.
If you used a living adjustment and used the same thing I use in construction, it would take you to about the same number.
Got it. All right, well, those are my three questions. Members of the board? Member Larson.
And with all due respect to Mr. Richards, fare that you're referring to, the 75%, is based on the fare from San Francisco to L.A. by air. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Larson. That is would be the discounted airfare from L.A. to San Francisco. The number that I think that we're using right now in the latest modeling, I think I saw, was at $83. If you look. Not at our modeling, but if you look, say, on orbits or something like that, you'll see anywhere from $70 to $77.
Considering like the transportation or by air from Fresno to San Francisco or Fresno to L.A.
Right.
is considerably more than...
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I don't have questions. When it's time, I have a couple of comments.
By all means.
First, my first comments is to thank the speakers who have been here, some on just one occasion, some on two occasions. I think the comments made by both Mr. Tom Richards and Mr. Brady were very much on point to the concerns that you have and for kind of what drives people forward. I had a meeting yesterday with Mr. Richards. And let me start out with saying I've known Tom since I've been a county supervisor. He's a local, successful businessman. He's not getting paid to be on the authority. But in his heart, he sees that something's got to give in Fresno County. And when you say something's got to give, we were a much more robust economy probably 20 years ago. Anybody in this room debate that, think we're healthier today? And that's in spite of huge efforts by elected officials to change those dynamics. But basically, through the information age, through development of industries, the two bookends, LA and San Francisco, have seen a lot of opportunity. They have ports. They have large airports. They are entry points to California. And the center of California has turned into an Appalachia, part because the state of California has decided we're a welfare state and it's easier to live in Fresno than it is to live in San Francisco. The rents are much better. But that being said, I guess on a real basic level, and Mr. Richards and I did talk about this. Something needs to give for the Central Valley to ever get healthy again. So I find people have a core gut reaction to the high-speed rail. They either hate it or love it. And then there's quite a few people in between who said, I don't know what to choose. So I went back and I looked at a number of things. In 2011, we did have a hearing, and there was lots of criticism out there. There was a State Bureau of Audits, incredibly critical. There was an LAO report. There was a peer review group. And I think since 2011, there's been huge changes and strides made forward. And like I said, I've known Tom Richards. He is a person I trust. When he says something, he says it based on data, based on research. He's a successful businessman. He knows finance. He knows numbers. I was pretty impressed that the high-speed rail had taken on to do Monte Carlo simulations. That's an effort to try to predict, based on a whole bunch of unknowns, and we all know there's a whole bunch of unknowns in this scenario, trying to predict what the likelihood of a particular outcome would be. And they've done hundreds and thousands of these simulations trying to get to a more steady number to say, well, based on all these different things that could happen, what's the likelihood of success? So, you know, I give them a lot of credit. They've done a huge amount of work since 2011. That does not take away the concern for the financing and the debt. And it's well known I'm pretty conservative. I don't spend money I don't have. And I'm cautious taking on debt because you have to pay it back. And I do see that being a fairly risky sort of place to be. I agree with the person who said check and double check the numbers and then check it again for a third time. To make sure. I agree with a person who said I like roads. Fresno County has the most county-maintained road mileage in the state of California. Majority of those road miles are in District 4, which I represent. There's always a call for an additional pothole or expansion, and I've worked really, really hard to get Highway 180 developed, and I'd like to see that both east and west. I worked really hard to get Academy finished, to 4-lane it instead of 2 lanes that was highly impacted with traffic and hazards to safety. I worked really hard to get expansion to Mountain View because connection creates economic opportunity, and quite frankly, the Central Valley's been left behind in all of that, and I don't see another massive shift other than to get us better connected in California. We have a lot of talented people. They need opportunity. So with that being said, I have taken the Economic Development Corporation's resolution. I've made some adjustments to it because, like I said, I don't take on debt I take that really seriously. I look at the broader issues as to what benefits. I don't like the connection of high-speed rail to the cap-and-trade one. I don't know that it meets the letter of that law. I'm not a big proponent of cap-and-trade, let's put it there. I think it has great harm to our economy. But in my discussion with Mr. Richards, I went and did a little research. The California Department of Transportation this year has a budget of $16.7 billion. State of California, $16.7 billion. The Federal Department of Transportation has a proposed budget of $77 billion. So there's, well, almost $100 billion. $53 billion to highways out of the Federal Department of Transportation. I think maybe a more reasonable approach, instead of going to so much bond indebtedness, might be to take a real big look at how much money we're spending on everything else. I don't know how many of you have been down to L.A. and driven a 12-lane wide segment of freeway that they're proposing additional lanes to. And what would get you out of your car? Needing to drive 5 miles and taking an hour to get there because you're stuck in traffic? It's just a matter of time. This area is going to see that happen just like Los Angeles does, and I don't like to go to Southern California because of being stuck in traffic and taking an hour to go 5 miles. I can walk it faster. So like I said, I have really looked at the resolution from the EDC, and I'm going to put that forth as another potential, and I can put some copies in the back. It doesn't say full steam ahead, damn the torpedoes. I don't agree with that. What it says is the authority is continuing to advance this unprecedented transformative investment in Fresno County. Despite efforts to shift the funds to more urbanized area, there are a lot of people that would have liked to see Highway 180 money instead of going out towards the east to have stayed in the urban core, just like LA and San Francisco would like to have that money in their areas and not see it in the valley. Many concerns raised by the Bureau of State Audits have been addressed and resolved. Many leadership positions on the authority have been filled. I mean, I heard criticism, you're spending more money, but 17 people for the entire state of California to run this authority for the biggest infrastructure project in the world. The financial modeling and ridership that's going through Monte Carlo simulations to evaluate the risk probability. And I commend the high-speed rail. They're looking at a hybrid alternative. That takes existing infrastructure and it partners this project with it instead of recreating it all brand new. I think that was very creative. And it also is more cost-effective. That while I still support the high-speed rail, I do have concerns about the financing. I do believe it needs to meet the requirements of Prop 1A. And if not, don't go out and don't borrow money. We already spend $77 billion as a federal government and $16.7 billion as a state. It's not like there's no money going through the system. So I would like to slow down the bond financing piece. I'm going to share with my colleagues a suggestion that states were concerned about the finance, but I think for our region it'd be a huge mistake to say, whoa, we can't do any of this, because I think we're burying our heads in the sand. How long can you build freeways until there's no more space? And when they built it in Southern California, it cost $1 billion to go 10 miles. At some point, we're all going to be stuck in traffic. So just as a different approach to the issue, because I think our issues really are in many ways financial in nature, and it's unfortunate that the original leadership on the high-speed rail, I don't think they did a good job. I think they trespassed on people's property. I think it was, I don't care what the public thinks, we're going to do this despite you. But I think there is good leadership there now. I appreciate Mr. Morales being here. He, in fact, called yesterday late evening when he was on one of his stops on the airplane because he couldn't get back to the West Coast because the plane kept getting stopped at different places and delayed. That's your transportation system. And I appreciate he came, and I appreciate Tom Richards for being here today and just standing up and trying to answer the questions honestly. So I'm not going to support just pulling out suddenly. We lost UC Merced, and that was a big loss for this area. While I'm just very happy it's in the valley, I think we have to rethink. I don't want to see bond indebtedness.
I'll second this motion if you're making that as a motion, as a starting point.
And I apologize I didn't have this sooner. I've been working on it, but it all takes time.
Could we let everybody
motion?
speak first?
Why don't we go ahead and wait
Is that a
on the
motion?
motions, because none of us have had even a chance to read, so we can't make a motion, or it'd be premature to make a motion on
Okay, when we
something
go,
haven't even
as a
opportunity.
courtesy then, as when we go to motions, can we go back to supervisor case first, if you want to read it first?
I think that is that is certainly an option.
Okay.
Out of fairness, I think that's okay.
Let me ask the clerk in terms of distribution. Maybe we can put one up on the screen. I want to make sure the public can see kind of the thoughts that went into it. Again, it's a very difficult issue. We've had a couple of weeks to re-review. I got a full packet from the High-Speed Rail Authority. It did have letters of support from business. While it wasn't solid commitments, it said what they would require to move the next piece forward. I did meet with Mr. Richards. I did read the 2014 business plans. So there's been a lot of data that's been looked at. It hasn't been in isolation.
I'd be inclined to take a few moments a few moment break, if that's all right with my colleagues and staff, because we have a whole
Mr.
new
Chairman,
resolution.
could we all make our comments and then take?
Definitely. But I just want, at some point, we should take a
Because
couple of
it's-
moments to read this,
Yeah.
because having just got it. But, all right.
Try to get copies for the
I have some more
public.
comments, too.
All right, let's move over to Member Pachegan, and then we'll go to Member Larson after her.
Well, I'm a little disappointed that this resolution was out there, and if you're going to, this draft resolution has been out there for 2 weeks, and I'm a little disappointed that we don't have opportunity to discuss that first. But having said that, I want to start by saying I do not support the high-speed rail project. I want to make that very clear. 2 weeks ago, we spent hours looking at the voter information packet and found an entire list of promises that have not been kept. 2 weeks ago, we examined Senator Quentin Kopp, who is really the father of high-speed rail and the first, I believe he was the first chairman of the High-Speed Rail Authority, his declaration stating the project does not resemble the intention of Prop 1A and the legislature. Not just what the voters supported, but even the legislature put safeguards in, and Prop 1A does not even resemble, or what has happened to the current project does not resemble what was in Prop 1A. So we've got the voter pamphlet that I think is disingenuous and swayed voters, and now we're saying it's not accurate. We have the father of high-speed rail saying what is now proposed is nothing like what was intended by Prop 1A and what was intended by the legislature. 2 weeks ago, we spent a lot of time, lengthy time, talking about the Reason Foundation. I brought it up about their article and reasons why, 5 reasons why high-speed rail should not receive any more money. We've had 2 extra weeks to look at the resolution that was presented, which is complete and factual. I haven't heard anybody get up to say that the resolution presented is not complete and factual. And I'm not going to go through it point by point. But today, and some say, if the Board of Supervisors changes their position, you know, it's too late and it doesn't really make any difference. It's not going to stop the project. Well, I have a few comments to that as well. This board and the taxpayers of this state, and especially the taxpayers of the Central Valley, have waited 6 years patiently. 6 years to get secure funding, 6 years to produce a viable plan, 6 years to adhere to the expectations of 1A, Prop 1A, that the voters narrowly supported. We've waited 6 years for the details. The details are still out there floating somewhere, and I believe that it's incumbent on this board to say we supported this in 2007 before the initiative, because we did. High-speed rail, we supported the concept. And then we came back, and that was before my time, but then we came back in 2009 after it passed narrowly, and we said we still support it in concept, and we did at that point because we thought, and everybody else thought, that what we read in the general election information packet was accurate. And so still in 2009, this board says, yes, you know, move forward. And then we expressed our lots of concerns in 2012 that some have been addressed. Today's letter from the High-Speed Rail Authority says, today construction on the first leg of high-speed rail has commenced. And that, to me, is the problem. The plan, there's lots of questions if it's viable. The funding, I am so afraid that my grandchildren are going to be sitting at, well, probably my great-grandchildren, will be sitting at the dinner table saying, what is that track and where does it go and why did they spend all that money on that? And it's just going to be a little portion because they really don't have the money. California can't afford it. And you know what? Sometimes you got to make choices. It might be a little bit better, might make things a little bit easier. I ride the train, Amtrak, and going to Merced, I don't know. Some people maybe need to get there faster, but it gets there within an hour. It's not that bad. But so as we go through the resolution, it's factual, it's complete. It's time for this board, if there are 3 people, and I hope there are, that will stand up and say, we no longer support this project the way it is written and the way it has been in the direction it's going. So if you're going to just pull I hope that's fine, but, I'd like to make a motion, and then we can fight over whose motion gets heard first. I didn't hear you say this is a motion. I heard your second, but I didn't say this is a motion, so I would like to make a motion that
I think our chair said that it would go back to Supervisor Case to make
She did not say this was a motion.
Oh, you're right, she didn't, but he did say, out of respect, he would go back to her to make the first motion.
Let me jump in here. We have an item continued from 2 weeks ago. I know that there was new information submitted and a solicitation of a motion and a second for that. I think out of fairness, we should, before we jump into the motion categories, that we have an opportunity to read the document, even if it's only for 4 or 5 minutes.
It's very similar to Supervisor Perea's. Actually, I think it's almost exact to Supervisor Perea's that was presented on Friday.
And I'll definitely want to look at the red language.
If I might
there's any,
highlight.
Hold on one quick second. Member Perea, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. What was forwarded Friday was a document sent from the EDC, and I think, the only supervisor here Friday, so I did the courtesy of forwarding it to everybody. So that's how that arrived. But yes, you did. You saw it Friday. Just to make a few quick comments. First, let's start off with the fact that this issue is in the courts. And even though I don't agree with my friends in Kings County, that it's certainly their right to file the litigation that they have filed, just like the folks in Atherton have. And the issue before the courts right now has to do primarily with CEQA and whether the spirit of Prop 1A is being followed. That's what's going to be litigated, and that's where a decision is going to be made, not in here. Okay, we spent 2, 3, 4 hours last week talking about it, a little less than 2 hours today. But at the end of the day, the decision on those 2 points aren't going to be made in this room. Now, the high-speed rail project, that's not the first rodeo for Fresno County or the state of California or the United States. We constantly build infrastructure projects in this country. Let me just give you an example. 180 east from Clovis to, where's it going to end up? Frankwood. Built in segments. It's a 23-year project. I know some folks here have some concern about, gosh, this has already been 6 or 7 years into being, and we don't have the first piece of track laid out yet. Well, it takes time to build infrastructure. It takes money, it takes planning, it takes engineering, and everything that goes with it. And if you looked at the funding mechanisms for those major projects or sections of 180 East, you can see that it's a combination of local money, state money, federal money. And when you're at the mercy of the federal government, like some folks would like to say here today, gosh, we don't know where the money's going to come from. That's really the way it works in the funding of public infrastructure. You wait for allocations from the feds, you wait for allocations from the state, you pass local initiatives to self-build and construct projects that you vision, and that's just the way the world works. When folks look at this project and act like, gosh, this is the first time we've ever built something, it's kind of silly. And I think we need to get over that. I know there are some folks who will not like high-speed rail ever, and some that will love it forever. Supervisor Case said, there's not much in the middle. But let me just leave you with a few things. And I have a lot more comments to make, but I'll just wait as it progresses. We talk about worried about our grandchildren and what the debt they may have, and California can't afford this. Let me just put this in context. And somebody made a cartoon analogy, and the cartoon I see is the world, and I see United States really bright light into the world. But then the next frame that I see is a real dim light. And that dim light is somewhere along the line. The threat to this country isn't overseas. It's from within. You know, this country doesn't believe in itself anymore. That's the problem here. You know, when we appropriated $732 billion for a war in Iraq since 2001, the average of our expenditures in Iraq are $64 billion a year. The average of our war debt in Afghanistan, in Iraq, it's $114 billion a year. Combined, you're talking about $4 to $6 trillion long-term of debt that this country has acquired. And it's debt. This wasn't cash we had in banks. So the last part of that cartoon is a bank. It's called the U.S. Treasury, which we all put money into, except there's no front door leading into this country. There's a back door leading around the world, paying for wars, paying for other people's infrastructure. I mean, I was just given an article this morning about China and how they're leading the charge on high-speed rail and how it's changed their economy, and it's showing all their gross national product. I mean, just how it is just expediting their country and connecting it.
Do they follow CEQA?
Then no, they don't. But you know what? That debt that we have in Iraq and Afghanistan, guess which country bought up all that debt? Okay, but I don't see all the protests and all the resolutions about that. The resolutions are saying is we're not strong enough. We're not good enough. We're not tough enough. Our kids don't deserve what our grandparents and grandparents gave us in the state interstate system that we have in this country, and the Hoover Dam, and the Golden State Bridge, the Panama Canal. Everything that made us great today is too hard for us. Well, you know what? It's not too hard for all of us. And we really have to think more and better of ourselves if we're going to move this country forward. And when you have this kind of debt, even Turkey, Turkey is building a high-speed rail system. And I wonder where their money's coming from. How much aid do we give to these countries where they're investing in themselves? So this really is about an investment in ourselves. Yes, I bet every one of us, if we sit down in a room and have a cup of coffee, we are going to find a problem with this project. Just like we're going to have a problem with what's happening on 180 East. It took ag land. When 41, who remembers the old days when 41 didn't exist and it just ended at Bullard Avenue? And everybody was wondering, you know, the Freeway 41 to nowhere, I guess somebody may have called it. It takes time. But we have to invest in ourselves, and that's what this is all about. And I think Supervisor Case hit the nail on the head. Is this Board of Supervisors in the 1990s played a role in losing UC Merced because of a lack of vision and leadership? This board in the late 90s played a role in losing Children's Hospital across the river because we couldn't finish and pull off the United campus that we had visioned in downtown Fresno. Let the decision for this project roll out in the courts and at the federal government level and at the state level. This is way above our pay grade, and that's a fact. I think the bottom line today is we stay the course, we stay in our competition for the maintenance facility, and I'll underscore, you don't see supervisors here from Kings County. You don't see the mayor or any councilman from Kings County here. You don't see the economic development director from Kings County here or any other official. And there's a reason for that. Because the back channels, like we all know in politics, is I think the friendly competition, because I've been so involved in high-speed rail, is I've gotten the calls the last few weeks from Merced, from Madera, from Kings County. And some of them have been, can you include us in your training programs for the people that are going to go to work? Some of the other calls have been, we hope you guys pass that resolution because we're going to get back in the ballgame and we're going to start changing our positions for that maintenance facility. So just leave it alone, Board. Let's just leave it alone. I mean, I would second Supervisor Case's reso if she introduces it right now. I mean, that's the way we stay the course. It's responsible. We ask for more information, but we move forward with where we're at. And if that's too hard, then I guess it's too hard.
Member Larson.
Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I've heard a lot of comments, but I've heard also a lot of criticism of this board. We're not visionary. You know what? On the west side of Fresno County right now, there's three $25 million projects going in for processing plants. That's not being visionary. Without water. They're thinking that water's coming our way one of these days. God will help us, and I hope he does, because we need it. We're talking about issues that we've been criticized for. I haven't seen anybody stand up there when we're waving for the dams. There's been a few of you out there, but I haven't seen the big outpouring that we've had for this. When we need the water, when we've got 40% unemployment out there in the Mendota, Tranquility, Fireball, Huron area. Where are you, labor? Come on, help those people. They need jobs. I haven't seen anybody do anything but say, well, the board doesn't do this and the board doesn't do that. We want 180 to go west. 180 was registered to go west when 180 was registered to go east. But east it went because of the population. But it needs to go west. That's a construction job that needs to be done. And all of a sudden, now we're hung up on this. I happen to think that what we really need to do is take a second look. I agree with Supervisor Pachigian's resolution, and I will support her resolution. But I'm telling you right now, there's a lot more to this than just that. I have the utmost respect for Mr. Richards, one of the developers that I think and trust probably is the most trustworthy that we have going for us. And I respect his commitment, but I don't have to always agree. And I met with him last week and said, you know, I can't say that I can't support you. Maybe I won't agree with you. He knows that because he's man enough to stand up and say what he believes. And I believe we need to be people enough to stand up for what we believe. When someone says the rescue mission needs to move on and get visionary, who has done more for West Fresno in this community than the Fresno Rescue Mission? And they haven't taken something that's been a problem created by them. They've taken a problem that's been neglected and created by us, our people, that we've allowed to fall into the projects that they try to correct, and that's sin. I think that we need to stand behind the rescue mission for what they do for children. The $6 million they spent on that project up there to rescue the children, and now part of it's going to be taken away from them. But yet they're being criticized because they're not visionary. Come on, folks. Let's look at what we're doing. I was for high-speed rail when it started, and I still think high-speed rail has a place. But I think at this point, we need to take a breath and say, what can we do to make it better? So I'm going to support Supervisor Pachigian's resolution.
All right, board. I'm actually
Chairman?
I'm going to ask that we have a 3-4 minute break. I want to read this material, and if the board will have the patience to oblige that. County Council, do we just simply just declare a break for 3 or 4 minutes?
You have the authority to do that, yes.
All right, give me 3 or 4 minutes.